Isabella, a young woman of 22, belonged to one of the most powerful families in the city. Her father, Roberto, was an influential businessman in the energy sector, while her mother, Claudia, came from a noble family with a long tradition of prestige and wealth. For Isabella, life had always been a golden labyrinth where every decision was made by others, and her role was simply to adapt. Since childhood, Isabella had been raised to be impeccable, to follow the rules of her family and society. Her every move, her every choice were dictated by rigid expectations and a future already written. But that future, now that it was about to come true, seemed to her like a prison with no way out. Before continuing, subscribe to our channel and activate the bell. Roberto and Claudia had planned her wedding to Giulio, a multi-millionaire businessman known for his coldness and ruthless business sense. Giulio was not interested in love or happiness. For him, Isabella was just a means to strengthen his image and consolidate the relations between their imposing families. Isabella walked down the hallway of the grand mansion, each step echoing off the luxurious walls and seeming to bring her ever closer to a fate she had not chosen. The tension was palpable in the air as she made her way to the living room, where her parents were waiting to discuss the final details of the wedding. Sitting in the leather chairs, Roberto and Claudia exchanged approving glances as they saw her enter. The scene was planned to perfection, like everything in their lives. "Sit down, Isabella," Roberto said in his usual firm voice. Isabella obeyed, but the weight of their control was crushing her more and more. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, but her voice trailed off under her father's stern gaze. "This isn't about you," Roberto said coldly. "This is about our family, our future. Giulio is the right choice. You have to put aside any hesitation." His father's words were like a hammer that destroyed any hope she had of being heard. Isabella's heart was beating fast, but she knew her feelings didn't matter. Giulio wasn't the man she could ever love. There was nothing about him that aroused affection or attraction. To everyone, he was a figure of power, a cold and calculating businessman. The prospect of spending her life at his side seemed like a sentence. Claudia, who had been silent until then, spoke with her typical manipulative sweetness. "Dear, I know it all seems difficult now, but love can grow over time. This is how marriages work in families like ours. You'll see that it's the best choice for everyone." Those words resonated like a golden prison. Love for Isabella was not a superfluous luxury, but the very heart of life. But in that moment, she understood that she could never convince her parents otherwise. Their world was made of business, power, and appearances, and love had no place in that cold equation. The days leading up to the wedding passed like a fog. Isabella felt like a spectator of her own life. The dress fittings, the meetings with the decorator, the dinners with high society, everything passed around her as if it were part of a dream. But that dream was a nightmare from which she could not wake up. Every time she tried to rebel, her mother, with her sweet and reassuring tone, managed to bring her back into line. "Darling, all these feelings are normal. I felt that way too before I married your father. But look where we are now, a successful life, a respected family. You will see that everything will make sense in time." But Isabella didn't want a life of just being successful in the eyes of others. She wanted to really live. She wanted to love someone who knew her and understood her, and she knew that Giulio would never be that man. One evening, during a formal dinner, Isabella tried to express her doubts to Giulio. Sitting across from each other in the long dining room of his villa, she took courage. "Giulio, I don't know if I'm ready for all this," she began hesitantly. "It all seems wrong." Giulio looked at her blankly, letting her speak. "We don't really know each other, and I don't know if I'll be happy in this marriage." After a pause, Giulio responded with a coldness that struck her like a sharp blade. "This isn't about happiness, Isabella. This is about an agreement, an inner family deal. I need a wife who will give me stability. You need someone who will keep your family on top. Love is irrelevant." The words froze her blood. Giulio didn't see her as a person, but as a piece of a puzzle, a piece in the great game of power. "And me? What happens to me in this deal?" she whispered, feeling tears fill her eyes. Giulio looked at her with a cold smile. "You'll adapt, you'll see." Those words haunted her for days to come, and with each passing day the sense of oppression grew. Isabella felt trapped in an invisible cage, built with the weight of her family's and society's expectations. The wedding day finally arrived. The villa was a chaos of preparations. Flowers, illustrious guests, photographers preparing their cameras to capture every moment of what was supposed to be the event of the year. Isabella, sitting in front of the mirror, felt detached from everything. The wedding dress, perfectly designed, was nothing but the last piece of her golden prison. When her father came to take her to the altar, Isabella knew that time was running out. She left the room and walked beside Roberto, feeling the weight of expectations on her. The great hall was filled with guests, their eyes fixed on her as she advanced toward Giulio. Isabella's heart was beating so hard she felt like she was suffocating. When she reached the altar, the priest began the ceremony. The words echoed in the room, but Isabella could only hear the sound of her own labored breathing. Then the moment came when she heard that sentence. It hit her like a punch in the stomach. "Isabella, do you accept Giulio as your lawful husband?" Silence fell heavily in the room. Everyone's eyes were on her, waiting for her answer. Isabella took a deep breath. She looked at Giulio, at her parents, and then with a strength she didn't know she had, she said, "No, I can't. I don't want to." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Giulio's mouth dropped open in disbelief. Isabella let go of his hand and, without waiting a moment longer, began to run. The veil fell from her hair, and as she crossed the room, she felt everyone's incredulous stares. But she didn't care. She was finally running away. She stepped out into the cold night, her heart pounding, her shoes left in the mess. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't go back. She was finally free. Did you like this story? Leave a comment below. Thanks for watching the video till the end, and see you next story.